Welcome to The Next English, where we learn English through easy and friendly podcasts. Today, we're doing something special. We're going to learn English while exploring the fascinating story of great powers throughout history.
This is a long episode. You can listen while studying, working, relaxing, or even falling asleep. Take your time, pause when you need, come back anytime.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone learning English or interested in history. Your support helps us create more content like this.
Now let's begin our journey through time.
So, I want you to just close your eyes for a moment and imagine you were standing in a major European city.
Let's say Paris, or maybe London.
Yeah, Paris is perfect. Paris in the summer of the year 1900.
Right at the dawn of the new century.
Exactly. It's a beautiful sunny day. The parks are completely full of people walking with their families. The cafes are just buzzing with conversation. There is this incredible feeling of electricity in the air.
Quite literally, right, with the new technology.
Right. Technology is moving forward at an absolute breakneck speed. The economy is booming. You've got new trains connecting cities that used to be days apart. Telegraphs are connecting whole nations almost instantly.
It was a time of massive, unprecedented optimism.
It really was. I mean, people genuinely believed that civilization that it had finally won.
Yeah.
You read the letters and the newspapers from that time, and they believe that humanity has become too smart, too civilized, and honestly, too economically connected to ever destroy itself again. They really believe the days of massive, bloody wars they're a thing of the past.
It is a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And it's also a deeply heartbreaking one because we know what is coming.
Yeah.
We know that they were tragically, horribly wrong.
Within just 14 years of that beautiful summer day, that entire world would be completely torn apart. The 20th century was not a century of peace. It became the bloodiest slaughterhouse in human history.
We are looking at a century that gave us 2 world wars and a terrifying Cold War. It's a cycle of violence that is almost impossible to fully comprehend when you look at the raw numbers.
The numbers are just staggering.
They are. Just look at World War I. Roughly 9 million soldiers died. 9 million. Pause and think about that for a moment. 9 million young men. An entire generation wiped out in the mud and the trenches of Europe.
And then, they called it the war to end all wars. But it wasn't.
Not at all, because just 2 decades later, World War II arrived. And it was even worse. 50 million people died.
50 million.
And the truly terrifying part of World War II, the part that really shifted the paradigm, was that more than half of those deaths were civilians. Regular people, women, children, the elderly, people who were just trying to live their lives in cities that were turned into ash.
And even after all that, even after the guns of World War II finally fell silent in 1945, the violence didn't actually stop.
No, it just changed shape. We entered the Cold War.
Right. The United States and the Soviet Union faced off. And sure, they didn't fight each other directly, but millions still died in these massive proxy wars in Korea, in Vietnam, in Afghanistan.
Killing just kept going. The fear kept going. The world was standing on the absolute edge of nuclear annihilation for decades.
So when we look at this history that is just written in blood from beginning to end, it forces us to ask a very simple but incredibly difficult question. Why?
Yeah.
Why is history so violent?
That is the big question, isn't it? Is it because humans are just naturally evil? Is there something fundamentally broken in our DNA that makes us want to destroy each other?
Or is it because we just had bad leaders? I mean, was it all the fault of specific bad guys like Hitler or Stalin or the Kaiser? If we just didn't have them, would everything have been fine?
Or maybe it was bad ideologies. Was it fascism or communism that caused all the death?
Those are the answers we usually hear. It's what we're taught in school. We like to blame bad people. It makes us feel better.
It gives us a sense of control. It makes us feel like if we just get rid of the bad people and promote the good people, the world will be safe.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into a source that gives a completely different answer. And honestly, it is a much darker answer.
Much darker. We're exploring the framework laid out in The Tragedy of Great Power Politics by John J. Mearsheimer.
And his answer to that big question, the why, is shocking because he argues that these horrific wars didn't happen because of bad people. He argues that the world is a tragedy because the countries involved basically had no choice.
That is a heavy concept for people to swallow. He literally calls it a tragedy.
And he means that in the classic sense, right? Like in literature, like a Shakespearean tragedy.
Exactly. In a classic tragedy, it's a specific type of story where a character tries to escape their fate, but they cannot. The actual structure of the story, the world they live in, forces them into a bad ending regardless of their intentions.
Like Hamlet or Macbeth. The die is cast.
Right. And Mearsheimer is saying the international world works the exact same way. The structure of international politics forces countries to be aggressive.
Even if they want peace.
Even if they desperately want peace, the system itself pushes them toward war. This theory in political science is called offensive realism.
Offensive realism. And to really understand this, we have to start with the environment that these countries actually live in. Mearsheimer describes this environment using a very powerful metaphor. He calls it an iron cage.
The iron cage. It is a vivid image. It sounds like a prison that you cannot break out of.
In many ways, it is exactly that. And the bars of this cage, the metal that makes up the cage, is built out of a concept called anarchy.
Now, for anyone learning English, we need to be very, very careful with this word. Because in normal conversation, or if you're watching a movie, anarchy usually means total chaos.
Yeah, if I say absolute anarchy, you imagine a city burning down, people running wild in the streets, breaking windows, stealing cars, just total disorder. No rules at all.
Right, a riot. But in political science, and specifically in this theory, anarchy means something very specific. It simply means no government.
No higher authority.
Exactly. It means there is no authority above the states.
Yeah.
There is no supreme ruler of the world. There is no world president.
Let's try to make this concrete for the listeners. Think about your own life for a second. If you are sitting in your house tonight and someone violently breaks down your door and tries to steal your television or hurt your family, what do?
You call the police. You dial 911 or whatever the emergency number is in your country.
Right, because there's a higher authority. The government has laws and they have police officers. They will come to your house, they will arrest the bad guy, and they will protect you.
The government has what political scientists call a monopoly on violence. They are the night watchmen. You don't have to defend yourself because they will do it for you.
But now, imagine you are a country. Imagine you are France, or you are China, or Brazil. If another country decides to invade you, who do you call?
There is no one to call?
No one.
There is no world police. There is no global 911.
What about the UN?
If the United Nations tries to help, they only do it if the powerful countries agree to it. They don't have their own independent army just waiting to save people. Ultimately, when a state is in trouble, when its borders are breached, it is completely alone.
That is a terrifying thought. I mean, imagine sitting in a dark room. You are alone. You have money and your family to protect. And you know there are other people in the dark room with you.
And you can hear them moving around.
Yeah, you can hear them moving. But there is no security guard. There are no cameras. You are entirely on your own. This is what Mearsheimer famously calls the 911 problem.
And this 911 problem creates a situation of constant, unending fear. Mearsheimer outlines 3 specific assumptions that every single country must make about the world they live in. And these 3 assumptions are what construct the iron cage.
Let's go through them slowly. We already touched on the first one, which is anarchy. There is no central authority. You are alone. No one is coming to save you. What is the second assumption?
The second assumption is that every state has offensive military capability.
Which is really just a fancy academic way of saying the other guy has a gun.
Precisely. Every great power has an army. They have tanks, they have fighter jets, they have missiles, they have the sheer physical ability to hurt you or even completely destroy you.
You can never look at another great power and say, oh, they're harmless.
Never. No great power is harmless. By definition, they all have the capacity to kill.
So you're alone in this dark room, and the person sitting next to you has a loaded weapon. That leads us to the third assumption. What is it?
The third assumption is that intentions are uncertain.
This is the psychological part. Because you can count how many tanks a country has. You can count their airplanes. You can literally look at satellite photos and see exactly where their soldiers are stationed.
But you cannot see inside the mind of their leader.
You cannot read minds.
Right. You might look at the leader of a neighboring country and think, well, he seems nice. He says he wants peace. He signs peace treaties and trade agreements. But can you be 100% sure? Can you bet your life and the lives of your entire population on his word?
And even if you do trust the leader today, what about tomorrow? What if that nice leader dies of a heart attack? Or what if he loses an election and suddenly a new, aggressive, angry leader takes over?
Intentions can change overnight. A friendly neighbor today can become a mortal enemy tomorrow. But the capabilities, those thousands of tanks and missiles, those remain.
So let's put these 3 things together. 1, no one is coming to save you. 2, the neighbors have weapons that can kill you. 3, you don't know if they want to kill you or not.
If you were actually trapped in a room like that, how would you feel?
I would be terrified. Absolutely terrified. I would be suspicious of every single sound. I would be watching everyone all the time.
Exactly. And Mearsheimer says this exact fear is the fundamental driving force of all history. He calls it rational paranoia.
Paranoia is a really strong word. Usually if we say someone is paranoid, we mean they're crazy, right? Like they think aliens are watching them or they think the mailman is a secret agent.
But here, Mearsheimer is saying it is rational to be paranoid. In an anarchic world, paranoia is the smart thing to do. It is the logical baseline.
Because the cost of being wrong is death.
Exactly. If you assume your neighbor is friendly and you don't build an army and then you are wrong, you get conquered. Your people are slaughtered. You lose your freedom. You cease to exist as a country. Look at Poland throughout history. The cost of being wrong is total erasure.
So in this environment of constant rational fear, what is the goal? What does every state want above all else?
The single overriding goal is survival. Nothing else matters if you don't survive. Before you can be rich, before you can be a beacon of democracy, before you can have high culture or good schools or a great healthcare system, you have to be alive. Survival is the primary absolute goal.
And how do you survive in a room full of people with guns who might randomly decide to attack you?
You make sure you have the biggest gun.
So this is where the aggression comes from.
Yes. Mearsheimer argues that the best way, really the only guaranteed way to survive in this dangerous anarchic world, is to be incredibly powerful. Specifically, to be more powerful than everyone else around you.
Because if you are the biggest, toughest guy on the block, no one will dare to mess with you.
Right. You deter them. This is the absolute core of offensive realism. And it really turns our normal, everyday morality completely upside down.
It really does, because usually we think of aggression as something that only bad countries do. We think peace is the natural state of things.
But Mearsheimer says aggression is just a rational strategy for safety. States act aggressively not because they are evil, bloodthirsty empires, but because they are scared. They're desperately trying to secure their own survival.
And the pursuit of power never really stops, does it? Because you can never be absolutely sure how much power is enough.
Never. Is having an army twice the size of your neighbor enough? Maybe. But what if they invent a new weapon? Having an army 3 times their size is safer. Having 10 times their power is even safer. So states become these power-hungry entities, constantly trying to eat up as much power as they can find, just to feel a tiny bit safer in the dark room.
Okay, we have used that word power a lot just now, but we need to define it. What does Mearsheimer actually mean by power? Because in the modern world, we often think power is just money. If you have a massive GDP, you are powerful. Or maybe soft power cultural influence, like Hollywood movies or K-pop music.
Those things certainly matter in the grand scheme, but Mearsheimer makes a very sharp, very important distinction in his theory. He distinguishes between what he calls latent power and actual power.
Latent meaning hidden or potential?
Right. Latent power is wealth and population size. You absolutely need money, and you need a lot of people to build an army. But money itself cannot shoot a rifle.
You cannot throw gold bars at an enemy tank and expect it to stop.
Exactly. Real power. The actual currency of international politics is military power. And he gets very specific here. He doesn't just mean having a bunch of nuclear weapons or a really great navy. He focuses incredibly heavily on land power, the army.
This is really interesting because for a long time, especially in the 20th century, a lot of people thought air power alone could win wars. They thought, hey, we don't need ground troops. We can just fly over the enemy and bomb their cities until they get up.
The strategic bombing theory. But Mearsheimer argues that simply doesn't work against a great power. Why? Because you cannot conquer and hold a country with airplanes alone. You can hurt them, you can destroy their factories, you can make their population suffer terribly, but you cannot physically make them surrender and control their territory unless you have boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. That is a very common English idiom in military discussions. It literally means actual soldiers standing on the dirt of the enemy country.
Precisely. You need a massive army to occupy the land, to physically walk into the government buildings, to police the streets, and to enforce your will. The world wars prove this beyond a shadow of a doubt. They were won by huge battalions fighting on the ground.
Britain had the greatest navy in the world during World War I, but they couldn't defeat Germany with ships alone. They had to send millions of young men to France to fight in the mud.
And the Soviet Union didn't defeat Hitler with airplanes or ships. They defeated him with the Red Army physically marching block by block into Berlin, Land power is the ultimate arbiter of victory.
So the army is the sword. It is the ultimate weapon of conquest. But there is also a shield, or perhaps a massive barrier, that Mearsheimer discusses at length. And this is a fascinating part of the book. He calls it the stopping power of water.
Yes, the stopping power of water. This is honestly one of my favorite concepts in the entire theory because it explains so much of world history in such a simple way. We often look at a world map and we just see distance. We see the blue parts as just empty space to cross. But to an army, water is a wall.
It acts like a giant, impossible moat around a castle.
Precisely. Oceans are massive, incredibly difficult barriers. It is exceptionally hard to invade a country across an ocean. Think about an amphibious assault, which is attacking from the sea directly onto the land.
Like D-Day in World War II, the famous scene in Saving Private Ryan where they land on the beaches.
Yes, the invasion of Normandy. It was one of the most complex, dangerous, and expensive military operations in all of human history. And remember, that was just crossing the English Channel. That is a tiny strip of water. You can almost see across it on a very clear day.
Now imagine trying to do that across the entire Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. You have to transport hundreds of thousands of soldiers, thousands of heavy tanks, millions of gallons of fuel, food, ammunition, medical supplies.
And you have to do all of that on slow-moving ships, and then you have to land on a beach where the enemy great power is already waiting for you with machine guns, artillery, and their entire army.
Mearsheimer basically says this is suicidal against a great power. The water gives a massive, almost insurmountable advantage to the defender.
We can see this vividly in history. Think about Napoleon. In the early 1800s, he conquered almost all of Europe. He was an absolute military genius. He had the greatest, most experienced army in the world. But he could not conquer Great Britain.
Why? The water stopped him. The English Channel stopped him. He couldn't get his army across without the British Navy just sinking all his transport ships.
And it happened again with Hitler in 1940. The German army was unstoppable on land. They utilized blitzkrieg and crushed France in just a few weeks. It was shocking to the entire world. But then, they stood on the coast of France, they stared across the water at the White Cliffs of Dover, and they couldn't get across. The water saved Britain again.
This has a huge implication for the whole theory. If water stops armies, what does that mean for world domination?
It means you can't do it.
Wow.
It means that no country, no matter how powerful, can ever rule the whole world. Global hegemony is physically impossible. You simply cannot project enough land power across the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean to conquer another great power on a different continent. The oceans are too wide.
So, if you can't rule the world, what is the next best thing? What should a smart, rationally paranoid country aim for?
You aim for regional hegemony.
Ruling your own neighborhood.
Precisely. Since you can't control the entire globe, your primary goal should be to completely dominate your own geographical region. If you dominate your region, you are safe. No one near you can hurt you. You essentially become the Godzilla of your continent.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If I'm the Godzilla of my continent and I am completely safe because I've defeated all my neighbors, why would I care about what happens on the other side of the world? Why do regional hegemons interfere in other places?
Because of the ultimate fear. The fear of a peer competitor.
A peer meaning an equal.
Right. You do not want an equal. If you are the king of your region, you want to be the only king in the world.
Ah, I see. If I am the king of the Americas, I really don't want a king of Europe or a king of Asia to emerge.
Correct. Because if another country dominates its region, it becomes free. Doesn't have to worry about its neighbors anymore. Its local threats are gone. So it can use all its extra wealth and power to roam around the world and cause trouble in your backyard. You can build a massive navy and sail right up to your coast.
So the strategic goal is to keep all the other regions divided. You actively want them fighting each other.
Mearsheimer calls this acting as an offshore balancer. You stay safe on your side of the ocean, but you throw your weight around. You send weapons or money or sometimes troops to make sure that in the other regions there is a balance of power. You want multiple powers competing and bleeding each other out so that none of them can ever rise up, dominate their region, and challenge you.
It's like you want to be the only shark in your tank. And if there is another tank across the room, you want lots of little fish fighting constantly in it. You definitely do not want another big shark to grow in that other tank.
That is a brilliant analogy. Exactly. And this brings us perfectly to the only country in modern history that has actually achieved this mythical status, the United States.
Long pause.
The American success story. This is where the book gets really provocative. Because Mearsheimer treats the U.S. not as this uniquely good or moral or exceptional country, but as the absolute perfect example of a ruthless, offensive realist state.
Yes. If you look at American history through this realist lens, it changes how you see almost everything. We are so used to hearing stories about American liberty and spreading democracy. We learn in school about the brave pioneers and the explorers heading west. But Mearsheimer focuses purely on American conquest. The United States did not become the most powerful country on Earth by accident. It wasn't just geographical luck, it was calculated, relentless aggression. Let's travel back to the 19th century, the 1800s. The U.S. starts out as just this narrow strip of 13 colonies on the east coast of North America. But the leaders, the founding fathers, and the presidents who came after them, they implicitly understood the rules of the realist game. They knew that to be truly safe, they needed to dominate the entire Western Hemisphere.
So what does the U.S. do? It pushes west. It engages in a massive, brutal continental expansion. It wipes out the Native American populations that were already living there, moving them onto reservations or actively killing them in a series of wars. And then it looks south. It fights a major war with Mexico in 1846.
And let's be very clear about that Mexican-American War. The U.S. invaded Mexico. They took a huge chunk of land, what is now California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah. This wasn't a defensive war to protect Washington. This was a war of pure conquest to secure the continent. They wanted to reach the Pacific Ocean. They wanted to own the land from sea to shining sea.
And simultaneously, while they were conquering the land, the U.S. systematically kicked out the European powers. They issued the famous Monroe Doctrine,
Which was basically the U.S. telling Britain, France, and Spain, stay out of our backyard. This whole hemisphere is our region. You are not allowed to colonize here anymore.
and it worked. By the year 1900, the United States had achieved exactly what Napoleon and Hitler utterly failed to do. It achieved total, undisputed dominance of its home region.
And look at the map of the United States today. Because of that 19th century aggression, the U.S. now has what Mearsheimer calls the luxury of safety.
It is an incredible luxury. Look at the borders. To the north, Canada, a very friendly country with a relatively small population and a small military. To the south, Mexico, again, a friendly country with a relatively weak military compared to the U.S.
Yeah.
And to the east and west.
Fish. Giant oceans.
Thousands of miles of water. It is an absolute fortress. No great power in history has ever been as fundamentally safe from invasion as the United States. And because the U.S. is so safe at home, because it doesn't have to constantly guard its borders against a massive enemy army, it is uniquely free to send its military all over the rest of the world.
It can fight in Europe, it can fight in Asia, it can fight in the Middle East. It can act as that offshore balancer we talked about, doing all this without ever really worrying that someone is going to invade Washington, D.C. or bomb New York with ground troops.
Compare that to Germany or Russia. Germany is stuck right in the middle of the flat plains of Europe. It has France on one side, Russia on the other. It has always been surrounded by rivals. It never had the luxury of safety. It was always in the dark room with other guys holding guns.
Which leads us perfectly into our next chapter. Because the American story is a textbook realist success story. But the European story, that is a pure tragedy. Specifically, the tragedy of the two world wars.
This brings us to the inherent dangers of what Mearsheimer calls unbalanced multipolarity.
That is quite a mouthful. Let's break that phrase down for our English learners. Multipolarity.
Multi means many. Pole means a center of power. So a multipolar system is simply a world with many strong powers operating at the same time. In 1914, right before World War I, Europe was highly multipolar. You had Great Britain, France, Russia, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. That is a very crowded, very dangerous room.
And unbalanced means that one of those powers is getting way too strong compared to the others.
Exactly. This overgrown power is what we call the potential hegemon. In the late 19th and early 20th century, that potential hegemon was Germany.
The German problem.
Germany was rising incredibly fast. It had unified into one massive country in 1871. It had the biggest, best-trained army. It had the most dynamic industrial economy in Europe. Germany essentially looked at the United States and said, I want to be like them. I want to dominate my region so I can be safe.
And naturally, the neighbors, France, Britain, Russia, were terrified. They saw this industrial giant rising right in the geographic center of the continent. They knew that if Germany won, they would lose their independence. They would be crushed. So in this system, how do states react when a monster appears in the room?
There are two main strategies states use to survive a potential hegemon. Mearsheimer calls them buck passing and balancing.
Buck passing. This is another great English idiom. Passing the buck actually comes from the old game of poker. It means avoiding responsibility and forcing someone else to deal with a problem.
In international politics, buck passing means trying to get another country to fight the monster for you. because war is incredibly expensive and horribly bloody. You don't want your young men to die if you can avoid it. So imagine you are Britain in the 1930s. You see Nazi Germany getting strong. You know Hitler is incredibly dangerous. But you look at your friend France, or you look at the Soviet Union and you say, hey, why don't you go fight the monster? I'm going to sit this one out.
You try to sit on the sidelines. You want someone else to catch the buck, take the damage, and bleed the monster dry.
Exactly. Before World War II, this is exactly what happened. The system was completely paralyzed because everyone was passing the buck. Britain and France desperately hoped the Soviet Union would stop Hitler in the East. The Soviet Union hoped France and Britain would stop Hitler in the West.
Stalin even signed a pact with Hitler, the famous Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, to carve up Poland and basically try to direct the German aggression toward the West.
Everyone was trying to avoid the fight.
Yeah.
And what was the result of all this buck passing? It failed catastrophically because no one stood up early to stop him when he was weak. Hitler just got stronger and stronger. He picked them off one by one. Poland fell, then Norway fell, then France fell in a matter of weeks.
So buck passing failed, which leaves the other strategy, balancing.
Balancing is when you finally stop playing games, realize the danger is existential, and form a massive alliance. You say, okay, no one else is going to do this for us. We have to combine our strength and fight this monster together.
Eventually, in both world wars, the remaining powers were forced to balance. In World War II, Britain, the US, and the Soviet Union finally joined forces to crush Germany. But it happened way too late to prevent the catastrophe of 50 million dead.
And Mearsheimer argues the darkest point of all here. He argues that these wars were structurally inevitable.
That is the tragedy. Germany felt it had to expand to be safe. It was surrounded and felt choked, and the neighbors felt they had to fight back to survive.
It wasn't just caused by bad people. Yes, Hitler was a monster, but the underlying geopolitical structure, the unbalanced multipolarity, made a massive war almost impossible to avoid. The distribution of power made peace impossible.
So, multipolarity, having many powers, it's incredibly dangerous and unstable. But after World War II, the world changed completely. The traditional European powers were completely destroyed, they were rubble, and we entered the Cold War. And interestingly, Mearsheimer says this terrifying period was actually a very stable time.
Yes, he calls it the Cold War stability. The global system shifted from multipolarity to bipolarity.
Two poles, just two absolute giants left standing, the USA and the USSR.
Mearsheimer argues that bipolarity is actually the safest, most stable structure you can have in an anarchic world. It is incredibly simple. You know exactly who the enemy is. You don't have to worry about 5 different countries and constantly shifting alliances or miscalculations. It is just you and the other guy, staring directly at each other across the Iron Curtain.
It's like a classic duel at high noon, just two cowboys in the street.
Exactly. And there was a second, absolutely crucial factor that kept the peace during the Cold War. The nuclear peace. We have to talk about May-D mutually assured destruction.
It's a terrifying concept to live under, but logically it makes perfect sense. If I attack you with nuclear weapons, you will launch yours and destroy me before yours even land. If you attack me, I will destroy you. So rationally, nobody attacks.
Precisely. Nuclear weapons fundamentally change the calculus of war. They make great power war much less likely because victory becomes physically impossible. You cannot win a nuclear war. You can only lose. Both of your societies will cease to exist.
This overwhelming fear created what historians now call the long peace in Europe. Despite all the tension, despite the spies, the proxy wars in the Third World, and the constant threats, the Soviet tanks never actually rolled across the border into West Germany. The system held.
So we had the chaos and bloodshed of multipolarity in the world wars, followed by the tense but durable stability of bipolarity in the Cold War.
But then the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The Berlin Wall came down. And for a while, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, the U.S. was the only superpower left on Earth, unipolarity.
And during this unipolar moment, people genuinely thought history was over. They thought great power war was completely obsolete. There was this massive, overwhelming belief in liberalism, the idea that global trade, international organizations like the UN and the WTO, and the spread of democracy would bring eternal peace.
It was that 1900 Paris feeling all over again.
Exactly. But Mearsheimer looked at this and said, "You are completely wrong."
He was very unpopular for saying this back in the 90s, wasn't he? He was kind of the skunk at the garden party.
He was heavily criticized because he said this peace is just a temporary illusion. Power politics is not dead. The iron cage is still there. It is just sleeping because the U.S. has no current rival. But as soon as a rival emerges, the cage will snap shut again.
And now, looking at the world today, we are waking up. Which brings us to the future tragedy, Chapter 7, the rise of China.
This is undoubtedly the most controversial and perhaps the most important part of Mearsheimer's entire theory today, because he takes all the logic we just discussed, offensive realism, the tragedy of the system, the drive for regional hegemony, and he applies it directly to the current geopolitical situation in Asia.
So let's look at China strictly through Mearsheimer's realist eyes. Over the last few decades, China has experienced an absolute economic miracle. It has become incredibly wealthy, the manufacturing hub of the world.
And remember, our definition of power. Wealth is latent power. And latent power inevitably translates into actual military power. According to the theory, as China gets wealthier, it will absolutely build a massive world-class army and navy. Why? Not because the Chinese leadership is evil, but because they want to be safe. They are acting rationally.
They want exactly what the United States has.
Exactly. The United States aggressively dominated the Western Hemisphere to ensure its own absolute safety. China looks at that and wants to dominate Asia to be safe. They want to be the undisputed regional hegemon of their own backyard.
And from their perspective, you have to admit, that is completely rational. Think about it. Right now, the U.S. Navy, a foreign military power from across the globe, regularly patrols the waters right off the coast of China, in the South China Sea. To China, this is a massive security threat, and frankly, it is humiliating.
Imagine if the situation were reversed. Imagine if a massive Chinese Navy fleet was patrolling the coast of California or Florida every single day. Imagine Chinese nuclear aircraft carriers parked just a few miles off the coast of New York, claiming they were just protecting freedom of navigation.
Americans would absolutely lose their minds. The U.S. government would not tolerate it for a single second. They would feel incredibly threatened and unsafe.
Precisely. So China acts rationally to push the U.S. out of its region. They build islands, they build ships, they project power. But how does the U.S. respond to this?
The U.S. cannot just let that happen. We learned the rules earlier. A regional hegemon like the U.S. does not ever want a peer competitor to emerge anywhere in the world. If China successfully dominates Asia, it becomes a true peer.
Correct. If China is free and secure in Asia, it won't have to worry about Japan or India anymore. It can use its massive resources to project power globally. It can challenge the U.S. directly in the Middle East, in Africa, or even in the Western Hemisphere. So structurally, the U.S. has no choice but to try to contain China.
Containment. This is the classic strategy of surrounding your enemy to prevent them from expanding.
The U.S. will try to form a coalition of alliances, which is the balancing strategy we talked about. They will work deeply with India, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia. They will even partner with Vietnam, a country they fought a brutal war against not that long ago. Basically, the U.S. is trying to build a military and economic wall around China.
And this dynamic, this structural reality, is the perfect recipe for an inevitable clash. China wants to push out and secure its region. The U.S. refuses to leave and wants to keep China boxed in. Both sides are acting completely rationally for their own survival, but their goals are mutually exclusive. They literally cannot both get what they want.
Mearsheimer says this intense security competition will be highly dangerous. It is the defining tragedy of the 21st century.
And he strongly warns that economic trade will not starve it, right? Because people often say, oh, but the U.S. and China trade so much. Our economies are completely intertwined. They make our iPhones. We buy their debt. They would never go to war because it would destroy both economies.
Mearsheimer points out that this is a dangerous illusion. The European powers were trading incredibly heavily right before World War I. Britain and Germany were each other's largest trading partners. Their royal families were even related. But money does not stop the primal fear of survival. When national security and physical survival are at stake, corporate profits do not matter. The guns will fire.
That is a truly chilling thought. We are so often told that globalization brings inevitable peace. But Mearsheimer says the iron cage is far stronger than any trade deal.
It leads us to a very somber, very profound conclusion. To summarize the whole framework, he compares states to prisoners trapped in a classic game theory scenario called the prisoner's dilemma.
Oh, describe that for our listeners. It's a very famous concept in psychology and economics.
Imagine two criminals are arrested, and they are separated into different interrogation rooms. They can't talk to each other. The police tell each of them, if you betray your friend and confess, you go free, and your friend goes to jail for life. But if you both stay silent, we don't have enough evidence, so you both just get a very light sentence.
So ideally, the best thing for both of them is to just stay silent. That is the best outcome for the group.
But you can't trust the other guy. You are sitting alone in your cell, sweating, thinking, what if I stay silent, but he betrays me? Then I go to prison for life and he walks free. I am completely ruined. So Mathematically, the rational choice, the only truly safe choice to protect yourself, is to betray him first.
And that, right there, is international politics. We might all want peace. Peace is obviously the best outcome for humanity. But because I can't look into your mind and trust you completely, I have to arm myself. I have to prepare for war just in case you betray me.
And the tragedy is, when I see you arming yourself defensively, I get scared. So I arm myself even more. And then you get more scared and you build more weapons. It is a spiral, a tragic, unavoidable spiral.
We look back at the grand sweep of history: Napoleon marching across Europe, Bismarck unifying Germany in blood and iron, Hitler's horrific conquest, the existential dread of the Cold War, and we see this exact same pattern repeating over and over again. Power dictates behavior.
And what he calls status quo powers. Countries that are completely happy with what they have and don't want any more power, they're incredibly rare. Usually only the reigning hegemon is happy. Everyone else is desperately struggling to climb the ladder or struggling just not to fall off and be crushed.
Mearsheimer's final reflection in the book is quite dark, honestly. He says as long as there is no true world government, as long as we continue to live in a state of international anarchy, the tragedy will just continue.
We are trapped in the cage. We can decorate the bars of the cage with international law and treaties and global trade agreements, but the iron bars remain. The fundamental structure of fear does not change.
So we have traveled from the bright optimism and ultimate anarchy of the past, through the unimaginable blood and mud of the world wars, into the frozen stability of the Cold War, and now we stand looking at the dangerous potential of the future with the rise of China. It really is a story of fear, of power, and the desperate, unyielding struggle to simply survive in a dark room.
It forces us to look at the world completely without illusions. It might not be the peaceful, cooperative world we desperately want, but according to Mearsheimer, it is the world we actually have.
It certainly makes you read the daily news differently. When you see a new conflict breaking out somewhere in the world, you stop asking, well, who is the bad guy here? And you start asking, what is the underlying structural pressure? What are the capabilities, and why are they afraid?
Exactly. Don't just look at the personalities of the leaders, look at the balance of power.
Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a provocative final thought. If survival is the only true goal of a nation, and fear is the only constant in the international system, is lasting peace ever truly possible? Or is the story of humanity simply a cyclical story of waiting for the next great power to rise and the next tragic war to begin? That is something for you to think about tonight.
Indeed. It's a question every generation has to face.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive into history. We hope this story helped you learn new words like hegemony, anarchy, and containment, while giving you a new way to see the world. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and leave a comment. Share this with a friend who is learning English. Good night and good luck.